Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Ground and Pound podcast, PFL World Tournament, round one. Heavyweights and light heavyweights this week in the first round matchups. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Carlos. What's happening, Carlos?
Absolutely nothing, brother.
We're going to dive right into these matchups in the first round. Carlos, you ready to get into it?
Let's do it.
So first up, we have Rafael Xavier taking on Alex Polizzi, and I'm going to pass this one to you, Carlos. Who do you have in this matchup?
Okay, in this matchup, I ended up taking Polizzi. He's known for just being able to take a beating. He's a pretty tough kid. Ends up trying to make a comeback. Not that he ends up getting the best of you on your feet. He ends up either getting you tired enough to get you to the ground, or finishing it with a submission or ground and pound. Xavier's kickboxing looks good. He has very long strikes. Likes to keep you at distance. The problem that I see is he's kind of like the traditional style of Muay Thai. He has no head movement. He stands in one spot, and he throws everything from there, which for somebody like Polizzi is easy if he's looking for a takedown once he gets tired, because you know where he's going to be. Or if he just wants to counter, you know that if he doesn't move his head, he doesn't really lift his hands often. He just stays to the outside. And his head's always going to be in the same spot, or his body, wherever you want to throw it, close your eyes, he's going to be there. Which is not the best way of fighting. He stands straight up. I love Muay Thai, just not a fan of it in MMA, traditional Muay Thai. So for that reason, I'm taking Alex Polizzi.
I always love it when we get the cards kicked off with some dissension here on the Ground and Pound podcast, because I'm going to go with Xavier. I was impressed with his striking, as Carlos mentioned. Very Muay Thai heavy style here. Brazilian national champion in Muay Thai. He's also a second degree Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, which impressed me as well. We haven't seen too much from his wrestling and his ground game, but obviously when the fight does go to the ground, we don't know how inflated that black belt is, but we might find out this week against Polizzi with his wrestling. And I was pretty impressed with Xavier overall with his striking when he fought against Simeon Powell. I like the fact that he throws everything heavy, as we tend to see in Muay Thai. That the left hook landed in the last seconds of that first round against Simeon Powell. He did drop him as well with a front kick, and overall he impressed me. I liked his striking. The only real concern I have with Xavier is he just kind of throw one at a time. He doesn't throw in combinations. He doesn't throw a ton of volume, but when he hits you, boy, does it hurt. And the real concern I have in this particular matchup with a guy like Alex Polizzi is he just is so hittable. Lack of head movement. Obviously, Carlos did say, he is very tough, he is very durable, but he is so hittable, and with a guy like Xavier's power, I just worry that we're going to find out how tough he really is, and all the damage is going to come from Xavier as Polizzi tries to wrestle. Polizzi did wrestle at Northwestern University, former LFA light heavyweight champion, so obviously very credentialed in the wrestling department, but to me he's a little bit undersized for light heavyweight. I think Rafael Xavier is going to have a little bit of a size advantage here. I don't necessarily think that Polizzi's going to be able to get the takedowns as easy as Carlos said. I think that he's got decent hips. I think he's got good movement on the outside. I think he's going to give Polizzi some difficulty in mixing in the wrestling here. And I'm actually going to go with Xavier. I think he does more damage on the feet. I think he lands the harder shots. And I actually think he might put Polizzi out on the feet. And I do remember, I think it was 2 out of 3 or 3 out of 4. I'm not 100% sure. I just checked my notes real quick. Yeah, two of the 3 of the losses here on Polizzi's record come by way of knockout. So I don't necessarily trust his chin. I think that Xavier's got the power to put him out on the feet. So a little bit of dissension here on the Ground and Pound podcast to get things started. And next up, we have Marcelo Nunes, taking on Sullivan Cauley. Is that how it's pronounced? Cauley? But Carlos, who do you have in this matchup?
In this matchup, I ended up going with Sullivan Cauley, right? Yeah,
that sounds
Sullivan
right. Yeah, better than I did, anyway.
You threw me off for a second, bro. Just like Polizzi just now. But anyway, I ended up taking Sullivan Cauley just because, at 36 years old, dropping weight is always, it's not really the best idea. Now, when it comes to Marcelo Nunes, what I think is he's got a lot of like, if you watch his fights at heavyweight, he's got some chub. Okay. So if he lost some weight, maybe it doesn't make that bit of difference. But within that weight loss, there's probably some muscle that's going to be gone and some strength as well, some power. I think that that's going to probably play a factor since he doesn't have a high work rate anyway at heavyweight. As he comes down, maybe he gets a little too active, or maybe he keeps the same style of fighting, which I think plays into the hand of Sullivan Cauley because he's very high pressure and he's got a very high work rate and he likes to push the pace. The only thing is that as a professional, Cauley hasn't really gotten out of the first round. Now, with Marcelo, if he pushes the pace and he's savvy enough to take it to the later rounds, let's see how Cauley actually how his cardio actually holds up. As an amateur, he's gone 3 rounds, 2 rounds, not a problem. But this is professional. This is a big guy, big opponent. It's a big stage for him. So I think he's going to rise to the occasion. When I see guys at the age anything over 26 and you start losing weight for fights, I don't believe that's a good idea. So that's also one of the big factors for taking Sullivan Cauley.
Yeah, I flip-flopped on this one a few times today, but I'm gonna hit the Cauley train as well. I think it's gonna be 2 for Cauley here. Main training partner of Ryan Bader, and the only lone loss that Cauley has is against Luke Traynor, and he was taken to the ground and submitted in that fight. And you have to believe that he's gone away, he's worked on that, his takedown defense, his grappling game overall, and he was able to come back and get a submission victory in his last fight. My one critique on Cauley as well that Carlos didn't mention is he does have a poor level of competition so far. You know, his wins aren't necessarily against some of the higher level guys in terms of MMA. Nunes obviously has fought at the tougher level of competition up at heavyweight. Coming down now to 205, again, I have question marks just the same as Carlos does about how he's going to look at 205. Nunes also teaches BJJ as his career. He is a main BJJ coach. That is his professional practice. His career path, shall we say, outside of fighting when he wants to put food on the table for his family. And so he's obviously around the sport, but I just have questions about the rest of his game. And I think a guy like Collier here is the much more credentialed striker. I think he's going to be much more athletic, much more crisp on the feet. And this really just comes down to, does Collier land on the feet and put Nunes out with the more credentialed striking, the more comfortable striker, or does Nunes get the takedown like Luke Traynor did and ultimately use his BJJ to find the submission? I'm going to go with Cauley here. I think he's going to be able to keep this fight on the feet. I think he's going to be, kind of having Ryan Bader, teach him a little bit about how to, circle out, not necessarily take this fight to the ground. And I think ultimately Cauley here is going to get it done with the hands. And Nunes does have power in the hands. He just kind of swings wild. When he fought against Daniel Marcos, he was able to put him out on the feet, but sloppy head movement from the heavyweights. They don't necessarily have a whole lot of head movement, and Nunes really just threw wild and was able to land. Those same shots are going to leave him exposed against a guy like Cauley here. So I'm going to go for Cauley here to get this done on the feet. And next up, we have Rodrigo Nascimento taking on Abraham Babley. And I'm going to kick this one off. And I like Babley in this matchup. He is a little bit undersized for the heavyweight division. Trains out of Manchester top team. And I've followed him a little bit, not necessarily that experienced inside the MMA smart caged or in MMA in general. But I do like one element of his game is that he kind of stays at kicking range and darts in with his athleticism. And he does have big, powerful hands, big, powerful fists. He does tend to throw the occasional calf kick, and he's very sort of built and can take a shot very well. I do think he is a little bit undersized for heavyweight. He could definitely, lose a little bit of weight, maybe come down to light heavyweight or maybe even middleweight, but like we've seen Cannonier do in the UFC. But in his last fight, he did lose against an Olympic-level wrestler whose name I'm not going to try and pronounce. But it was a competitive fight. He had moments in that fight. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to get it done, but I expect him to kind of come back here and have a little bit more success in this particular matchup. And he has good takedown defense, which I think is going to play a good factor in this particular matchup against Nascimento. And we've seen Nascimento over in the UFC, a ranked heavyweight. Unfortunately, he did lose to Derek Lewis and a few other, like Romanov, who's also going to be on this card. He got taken down in a few of those fights and controlled. He got knocked out. He does fight behind a jab. He does have good Brazilian jiu-jitsu, but we don't tend to see a whole lot of that. But I just think on the feet, I think that Nascimento leaves his chin up there. We've seen him get touched with guys with power. I think Babley in the first few rounds, 1 and 2, I think he's going to be live here with the athleticism, the hand speed, the overhand rights that he likes to throw. I like Babley here in this matchup. I do think the reach advantage for Nascimento might play a factor. He does, like I said, fight behind a jab, so keeping Babley at range with his jab and kicks might be a good idea, but I could see Babley maybe getting this fight to the ground as well, and I think he rebounds after his last performance, his last loss, and he gets back in the win column here. So give me Babley in a non-confident pick. But Carlos, who do you have in this matchup?
First of all, before we get into that, I have to say something about this. So you think Babley can get to 205 or 185 because he's 5'10"?
I think so.
That's absolutely impossible for him to get to 205. His legs are massive. If he went down to 205, he'd still have 30, I don't know, maybe like 32-inch thighs. This kid is massive. He cannot be that small. That's just me, because when people are 5'10", 250, 260, everybody's like, oh, he should probably be at a smaller weight class. That's impossible for that guy. Now, Daniel Cormier had a little bit of belly that he could lose, and that's why he went to 205, but he still had thick legs, so it was very hard for him to make it. You got to look at the guy before you make that suggestion, because there's no way that kid makes 205.
Well, my legs aren't. Daniel Cormier liked the Popeyes, if you remember the commercial. But
I remember the commercial.
Babley doesn't look like he likes the Popeyes. I take your point.
No, he doesn't. But like, my legs aren't anywhere near as big as Babley, and I struggle to make 205. You know what I'm saying? And people look at me and they see the shoulders and they go, "You're a big guy." I'm like, that's correct. But when you're talking about weight cutting, it has to do with if your lower extremities are huge, like, it's going to be very hard for you to make those weight classes. Anyway, I just want to get that out there for you. But I'm sorry I went at you like that, brother. I still
no. It's good. It's all good.
Anyway, I like this kid, Abraham Babley. The problem is I don't think he's undersized for the weight class. When he darts in and throws bombs, he's more looking to get out instead of at you, unless he's going for a takedown. So he doesn't commit his weight enough to hurt you. He just doesn't do it. What I see with Nascimento is I see Babley trying to get him down, wrestling him down. But I also see, like, Nascimento is going to keep him at bay with the long jab. He likes the long jab. He likes the 1-2s. And he's also going to be able to, get some body locks on Babley over his shoulder, a little an underhook here and there. And being 6'2", he's going to have an easier time lifting him up. The height difference, that's where it's going to be a problem, is for him taking down Nascimento. I would love to go with Babley because I love the fact that he's light on his feet. He flashes in and out. He has a very strong double leg too as well. But he also does that off of a jab. I went with Nascimento because, number one, okay, so he did fight, I'd say like the better competition in his career. But I also think that he's got very good takedown defense as well. And I think once that happens, I think he can keep the fight on the feet. And if you ask me, that's one part of Babley's game that he needs to work on.
Okay. I was expecting you to, after that whole, dissension with the weight there, I was expecting you to be like, but I'm still going to pick Babley. But let it be known, ladies and gentlemen, he did not want to pick the Babley train like I did. But I got to support my boy from the UK. But yeah, we another dissension here on the Ground and Pound podcast. Carlos with Nascimento, me with Babley. So we'll see who gets it done. That'll be one we'll watch closely this week. And next up, we have Oleg Popov taking on Karl Williams. And I'm going to kick this one off. And we've got two pretty heavy, grappling, wrestling style fighters here with Oleg Popov, the 2024 PFL finalist, grinding style wrestling, nice timing on his entries. And I actually think he's probably the better striker in this particular matchup. And not to say that either one of these guys has good striking, but Popov, to me, he darts in well. He kind of tries to disguise his shots as takedowns and kind of feints as if he's going to come in for the takedown and lands the overhands and the hooks. I also like the fact that here he's going to have a full camp because Karl Williams is actually a replacement fighter for Linton Vassell, Carl Williams taking this fight on less than 4 days' notice. So I have to kind of question, is the guy in shape? We obviously don't know. He's not had a full camp here, but former UFC heavyweight, wrestle heavy game plan. I believe his last fight was against Nunes, the kickboxer in the UFC, and a little bit of controversy behind him getting cut from the UFC. There was a rumor going around the UFC was telling people that not to wrestle because they were going to get cut if they were boring, so they wanted to see them strike and have more exciting fights. Carl Williams came out and said that's what they told him, and ultimately he decided not to wrestle in that Denise fight, and he still got cut. So it didn't really work out for him either way, but I got to go with Popov here. I think that his sort of Sambo base here, when he gets the body locks up against the fence, I think he's going to be able to trip Williams down to the fence, to the floor. I think he's got better top pressure. I think Williams is more of a double leg, single leg kind of guy, whereas I think Popov can kind of mix in the takedowns. I think Williams, if he does go in for the clinch, I think Popov's going to be able to get trips. I think he's also going to be the better striker in the matchup. Plus, he's going to have the better cardio and the full camp. He also, like I said, was the 2024 PFL finalist. I think he's got redemption on his mind. He's got more experience as well. Give me Popov in this matchup. Carlos, who do you have in this matchup?
I also went with Oleg Popov, and pretty much the reasons that you said as well. The one thing that I'm thinking with Karl is how effective is his wrestling? Is he going to be able to get himself out of bad position? He does have decent striking. Like it looks decent, but the fact is he's still kind of sloppy. Whereas Oleg, he's pretty basic with it, and it's basic enough to get him where he needs the fight to go. And that's why I went with Oleg, is that he kind of he doesn't try to do anything that's going to get him in trouble on the feet. And then he gets it where he wants the fight to be. And I think Karl will, he'll kind of windmill on his way in sometimes. And that leaves him exposed, as in the Janice fight. He got tagged a lot coming in. And Oleg Popov.
Yep.
That's what I got.
2 for Popov for this Thursday. Let's see if Popov pops off on Thursday and beats Carl Williams. And next up, we have Tim Johnson taking on Alexandr Romanov, and a pretty short breakdown from me here. I actually wrote in my notes, do I really need to break down an Alexandr Romanov fight and a Tim Johnson fight? So Tim Johnson, truck driver, good, hardy American, one hell of a model American. The guy, at this point, he's been finished in many of his fights now, getting up there in age. He does get taken down and beaten up on the ground. His chin probably will fail him in this fight if he does get hit by a big overhand from Romanov. Romanov is pretty much one round or bust. He did show a little bit of improvement in his last couple of fights with his cardio, but he kind of looks a little bit like a Boost in the third round. When it comes to his cardio, it completely falls off a cliff, and I don't necessarily think it's going to matter here. I think Alexandr Romanov's going to get the takedowns. He's going to get the body locks. He's going to take Johnson down, beat him up on the ground. He's going to get top control. I'm going to say ground and pound inside the first round. If he doesn't get Johnson out of there, it will be interesting to see what his cardio does look like. But one of my biggest criticisms of Alexandr Romanov is that he's always trained out of his own gym. So he's never gone out and actually seeked high-level training partners. He's never gone out there to actually try to improve and sort of be a small fish in a big pond. He always wants to be the big fish. I just don't think he necessarily pushes himself, which is why sometimes we see good performances and sometimes we see him kind of fall off of a cliff and not necessarily have good performances in there, purely because he's got a bunch of yes men around him. So I expect that to be the same in the PFL, but I think that's all it's going to really take to beat a guy like Tim Johnson here. I think it's a favorable matchup. I think Alexandr Romanov takes him down, ground and pound, first round. One pick for Romanov. Carlos, who do you have in this matchup?
What I love about this picture that you have up there is I just noticed that Tim Johnson is really sucking it in that gut in this picture. He looks remotely thin in that. That's the best picture he's ever taken. You can see the outline of the abs up top. Anyway, I got the Romanov bill, so I'm not making
I think he
fun
could
of
cut down to 205 or middleweight if you ask me.
I apologize, man, for attacking. Anyway, so I went with Romanov as well because Romanov, he's going to do exactly what you said he's going to do. I think he's going to be a little bit of a snuggler, get him up against the cage and just try to work his way down and throw those short shots inside. Also, on the outside when they're fighting, I would give the edge to Tim Johnson in that realm. But if you watch some of Romanov's fights, he standing up, they're awkward and they're wide, but when he lands, there's a lot of force behind it, and I think Johnson that might be something he doesn't expect since Romanov doesn't do that very often. But yeah, I think it's going to be pretty easy to get a hold of Tim Johnson and take him to the ground, or like he's done plenty of times, just hold him up against the cage, and you could call it clinch work. He's just rabbit punching and throwing little knees and getting the job done. So I'll go with Romanov in this one.
Yep, 2 for Romanov in this one. Next up, we have Simeon Powell taking on Karl Albrektsson. Oh, I butchered that one. Let me give that one another go. How do you say that one, Carlos? Help me out here. Is it Albrektsson?
I would say Albrektsson.
Albrektsson? We're going to call him Karl anyway. Karl is fighting this weekend, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm going with Simeon Powell.
You actually pronounced the T, which is very weird. I didn't think you did, but... Anyway, go ahead.
It's coming for me this week, ladies and gentlemen. Have you noticed this? No, I'm just.
I didn't know that.
For what I lack in the ability to say the names, guys, is I make up for in the research, hopefully in the picks. But we got Simeon Powell. I'm going with Simeon Powell here. 85-inch reach. That's all I really need to see here. And when I break down tape on both of these guys, I think Simeon Powell hasn't necessarily lived up to the hype so far when he's fought higher level competition so far inside the PFL Europe. He's kind of not necessarily come towards the moment, but he's kind of held his own. And I think that's going to be a learning factor for him here. Almost a 10-inch reach advantage for Simeon Powell. Fights behind a jab, has a really nice 1-2, a nice right that he disguises behind that jab. And one of the things I noticed about Karl in this particular matchup is that he has been knocked out in three of his 6 losses, but he also seems to struggle against guys with speed and athleticism, which is what I think which is what Powell has to me. So I think he's going to struggle against Powell in this particular matchup. Is when he fights against guys who are kind of plodding like himself, that lack head movement, that they're kind of meat and two veg, as we say in the UK, steak and potatoes, as Carlos has referenced before. When they're kind of just very unathletic and very hittable, he kind of has his way. He can kind of hold his own. But when guys have fast hands and a reach like Simeon Powell, he's going to struggle. And I think Simeon Powell's going to touch him up here. Simeon Powell fights on the outside. He can get in there and he can slang and bang as well. But I think that Simeon Powell's going to put Karl out here. I think, honestly, that the power of Powell, I think that he's kind of growing into his own now at 26 years old as well. He's only going to be getting better. So fairly confident breakdown here of Simeon Powell knockout for me. Carlos, who do you have in this matchup?
I also took Simeon Powell. Albrektsson, I've been seeing this guy fight for a while now, since Ryzen, first came onto the scene. And, he's a very big guy for 205. Solid power, decent, like very good grappling now, but decent at the time it started. It's always gotten better. And, as the time went on, his chin started to fade a little bit because sometimes he has like no head movement, doesn't bring his guard up. One of the things that got me is like I figured he would be making a jump to the UFC like a long time ago. And the problem is whenever he had that fight to actually show off his skills and ability, he just, not that he froze, he just had either a mental lapse or maybe the pressure got to him and he just never got over the hump. And he's always had the ability, just hadn't had the mental fortitude to get it there, to get the win that he needed. Simeon Powell, on the other hand, he's he's pretty game. He's always ready to go. He's always pressuring, throwing combinations, throwing long kicks. He'll take you down if he has to. Like I like how he mixes in takedowns, even though he'll stand back up as well, just to keep you guessing every once in a while. He'll do clinch work. He'll keep the strikes long. He'll fight you in close. I do like that about Simeon Powell. He's very game, so that's why I went with him.
Yeah, I think all the tools and all the talent is definitely there with Simeon Powell. I think it's definitely for anybody that watches MMA, you can see that at any moment he'll put it together, and hopefully he puts it together on Thursday and proves Carlos and I right in this particular matchup. Next up, we have Antonio Carlos Jr. taking on Carl Moore, and I'm going to pass this one to you, Carlos. Who do you have in this matchup?
Doesn't love Shoeface. That's probably one of the best nicknames in sports right now. Unfortunately, I'm going with Carl Moore. because I think he wants to finish. You know what I mean? Watching a lot of tape on him, watching his fights, he wants to be the aggressor, you know, and he wants to get the finish. And he's going to try to finish you, whether it's on the feet, ground and pound, or submission. The guy's ready to come at you. The problem with Antonio Carlos here, Mr. Shoeface, is the fact that like his striking is good enough to keep him out of danger. Okay, on the feet, he's always pretty good. The problem is the pressure from Moore, because he's very game. He's going to come right into him. I think that's going to make Carlos back up. And the problem is if he can't get you backing up, he can't get you to the cage. He can't take you down. And he likes to do a lot of his work on the ground as well. Standing up, he has a very wide stance. If I were Carl Moore, I would be tearing that front leg apart. Puts a lot of weight on it. Even though he doesn't throw bombs, he puts a lot of weight on his front foot, and it's very wide. It would take him off balance in a second, but I'm not in Carl's corner. That's just what I do. And the fact that Karl actually like throws everything with, you know, some ill intent to it. Like he doesn't just touch, wait for anything. He throws a one, it's got some heat on it. He throws a two, it's got some heat on it. He throws a kick, it's got heat. So I kind of like that. So although I love the name Shoeface, I got to go with Karl Moore.
Yeah, the nickname is a classic for sure. But I'm also going to go with Karl Moore here. I think on the feet, I think he's really starting to trust his hands. I think if he does end up on top, you know, if he does get this fight to the ground, or if Carlos Jr. gets this fight to the ground, if Karl Moore gets on top, he likes to rain down elbows. He has vicious ground and pound, and I think he's starting to really come into his own. And to me, Antonio Carlos Jr. is kind of submission or ground game or bust. When he can't have things his own way, that on the feet, I think Karl Moore's going to pressure, like Carlos said, and kind of chew up that lead leg. I literally wrote that in my notes, so I'm glad me and you are on the same base here, Carlos. But Antonio Carlos Jr., to me, I question where his head is at, because as people who are a fan of the PFL are aware, he was the 2021 PFL light heavyweight champion, won the $1 million, former world BJJ Pan Am's champion in 2012. So very credentialed in the sport, but he left the sport for a while to go do a reality TV show in Brazil, and let's just say that didn't go too well for him. So I kind of just question where his head's at. You know, is he taking the sport seriously? You know, whereas a guy like Karl Moore, the guy is a very physically dominant, very muscle-bound guy. You know, always showing improvements, and I just think that I can trust him a little bit more to take this fight game a little bit more serious. I think in terms of the striking, Karl Moore is going to be a little bit more. A step ahead at least. And I think if this fight does end up in the first round on the ground, I think Moore can survive on the ground well enough with Shoeface. And I actually think it's going to be difficult for Carlos Jr. to get Karl Moore to the ground, especially early. I think he's so big and so physically strong. He's going to struggle to get him down. So I'm going to pick Karl Moore here to defend the takedown, sprawl and brawl, and ultimately win a decision with the hands. And that brings us to the co-main event. And if you haven't already, people, hit that like and subscribe button. And if you like a guy that cannot pronounce names, you're going to love this one. But we've got Valentin Moldavsky taking on Sergey Bilostenniy. But I like Sergey in this one. I was impressed with him when I watched tape on him this week. And I've watched Moldavsky many times now. Obviously trained by Fedor Emelianenko. Nice boxing, very, very sort of tight. He tucks his chin very well. He can mix in wrestling if he needs to, but he likes to generally keep fights on the feet. We've seen him now fight a high level of competition and have success. Most of his wins, do come against higher level guys, but Sergey really impressed me, man. I watched one particular fight. I'm not sure who the opponent was, but he throws a spinning back kick to the body and then throws it again later on, and then he uses that to then go high and throw the spinning wheel kick. And you could see the guy's hand drop because he was worried about the spinning wheel kick to the body, or spinning heel kick to the body, and then lands it right upstairs and gets the knockout. And you could just see how, he was playing chess while the other guy was playing checkers on the feet. And I really like that. And he's also demonstrated in his fight as well that he can grapple, winning his last fight by heel hook. which I thought was pretty impressive, just to show that he's got layers to his game. He was able to avenge his loss against Tyrone Fortune. He was actually winning the first fight against Tyrone Fortune, but he landed shots to the back of the head and got disqualified. He then, like I said, revenged that fight against Tyrone Fortune. So he's looked pretty impressive. He's been on a nice tear. I like his calf kicks. He has very, very heavy calf kicks. And I think a guy like Moldavsky, I think his boxing, he's going to get that front leg chewed up. I like the kicks of Sergey at range here. And I like the 29-year-old here to come in and kind of perform the upset here. I think that he shouldn't be the underdog in this particular matchup on the betting lines. I think Moldavsky's very impressive. I think both guys can mix in grappling, but I think that this is going to be mostly a stand-up affair, and I think Sergey wins that stand-up affair. So give me Sergey in this matchup. Carlos, who do you have in this fight?
Well, I was waiting for you to pronounce that last name again because I wanted to see you struggle, because now you're going to hear me. I'm actually taking Sergey Bilostenniy, however. So anyway, Moldavsky has fought the better competition of the two, okay? He's the more well-rounded of the two. Like, I've seen more of his ground than I've seen of Bilostenniy, so I am going to say he's the more well-rounded of the two because he's always down to mix it in. Sergey actually likes to stay on the feet a lot more from the fights that I've seen. I have seen the heel hook, and I have seen him actually use wrestling to defend takedowns and then got a takedown himself, but he didn't stay down there very long. He's got some hammers. He throws sharp. There's not a lot of fat on it. They're straight. They're powerful. I've seen them just rock some guys with shots you wouldn't think would hurt. I know you already mentioned he's on the right side of 30. You're looking for this one. I'm assuming you think this is an upset because I would assume that Moldavsky is the favorite, but I see a lot of upside with Sergey. So if he doesn't win this, I think he's still going to have a lot of promise, but I think he's going to take this fight.
Nice. Yeah, I just think people are more familiar with Valentin Moldavsky in this, PFL setting. They're a little bit more, they've seen him take on the higher caliber guys. He's been in main events, whereas Sergey, I think, is not necessarily for PFL viewers the more known entity. And I think on Thursday, people will definitely remember this guy, win or lose. And that brings us to the main event, ladies and gentlemen, and we have Rob Wilkinson taking on Phil Davis. And I'm going to pass this one to you, Carlos. You got the Aussie or the American?
Well, Phil Davis is he's going to get my pick. Okay. I like Rob Wilkinson. I think he's a very good fighter. I think he's more complete than Phil Davis. What Phil Davis does bring to the table is he brings a lot of wrestling, and he'll go for takedown after takedown after takedown if he can't keep you on your feet. What he has done in the latter portion of his career is his defense is pretty solid. He doesn't just come in blind like he used to when he was younger. He's got a good high guard. He'll throw a jab, 1-2. He doesn't really throw a lot more other than that. He'll throw that rear leg kick a lot. But he keeps it very basic, and that's perfect because he's not supposed to be flashy. That's not him on the feet. And he does everything to make sure he can close the distance. Now, he will stand for the entire fight, and he'll actually not do too bad at all against some guys who are very known strikers on the feet at the weight class. Why? Because defensively, he's very solid. So I don't see Wilkinson being able to find an opening against Davis. I see Davis being able to win this with being busy and smothering him on the ground, smothering up against the cage for takedowns. And I think it's going to go to a decision because that's just Phil Davis. That's what he does. But yeah, I'm taking Davis.
So Carlos and I don't talk anything about picks and anything about the fight cards coming up before we get on and film these videos, ladies and gentlemen. And I thought today Carlos and I were going to, be on opposite sides of this one. But I thought I was crazy at first for picking Phil Davis, but I'm going to go with him too, honestly. I look through his record and I see, former Bellator champion, former national champion at Penn State with his wrestling. And Even at the stellar age of 40 years old, if you actually go and look at his credentials of who he's actually lost to inside of MMA, you look up guys like Corey Anderson, Nemkov, Ryan Bader, and everybody else he's beaten. And there's some, they're not bad losses inside of MMA. He's got a ton of experience. Like Carlos mentioned, he brings wrestling to the table. I think he's probably the better wrestler out of the two. Not to say that Rob Wilkinson doesn't have wrestling, but I think Davis is clearly the better wrestler. And even at 40, he has snappy kicks, a very athletic striker. He can dart into range and land with, a lot of explosion, a lot of power. And just for example, when it comes to his wrestling credentials, when I watched the Yoel Romero fight back, who is obviously a credentialed wrestler out of Cuba, he was able to get the takedowns in that particular matchup against Yoel Romero. So I have no doubt that Phil Davis is going to be live on the feet, live on the ground. And Rob Wilkinson, 2022, PFL light heavyweight champion. He does have a tight guard. He tucks his chin very well. Again, the people that he's lost to have all been credentialed names. He did make the final last year and lose out. And he has impressed me. But one of the things that I do notice about him is that ever since he had that he popped for PEDs, he's not necessarily looked the same to me. Now, he still looks good. He still beats most of his opponents, but he hasn't necessarily, I don't think his cardio's held up as good. I don't think that the frame and the muscle and the physique that he's had previously. And there's just something that I feel like he's lost a step from the PEDs, which we've seen in the UFC and other MMA organizations. When guys come off PEDs, they don't always necessarily look the same. So I'm going to go with Phil Davis here. I like him in this matchup. I think that the cardio is on his side, even though he is the older fighter. I think the wrestling's on his side, and I think the athleticism and the striking's on his side. And we saw in the last fight against a guy whose name I'm not going to pronounce, who won the PFL light heavyweight championship last year. Rob Wilkinson had a lot of trouble with the striking, and I think Davis is going to have that same success using his kicks and keeping Wilkinson at range and mixing in the takedown. So 2 here for Phil Davis. So I thought I was going to be alone on that island, but that concludes the PFL full card breakdown. And if you've enjoyed the content, ladies and gentlemen, hit that like and subscribe button. And before you go, I have to let you know what's coming on the channel. We have the full card breakdown for UFC Des Moines, Sandhagen taking on Davidson Figueiredo. That is going to be released tonight, so keep an eye out for that. And we have best bets videos coming out for the Sandhagen fight, the Sandhagen card, and for the PFL World Tournament for this particular card coming out to you on Friday. So keep an eye out for both of those. We're going to put some money in your wallets. We had great success in the last betting video for the UFC and the PFL, and we hope to keep that momentum rolling. And before we wrap things up, Carlos, is there anything that you want to say to the people?
No, man, I'm good. We went through our fights. I hope they enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you back here next week and on the next show.
Yep. Hit that like and subscribe button, people. Check out some of our other videos on the channel, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.
Peace.